Hi, I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who make it grow. Thank you to this week's sponsor, the 4th Annual National Association of Commercial Loan Brokers Conference and Expo event in October in Florida. Here's today's top story. Huge news. Watch Lance Sexton and I talk about proposed bicameral bipartisan legislation about SBA 7A oversight. All right, let's get into the news of the day, and this is why you're all here. Legislation was introduced on Tuesday. It was released, and I love this. I heard this term before, but I had to Google it. I have to be honest. Bipartisan bicameral. So what's a bicameral? It's bipartisan. You have the Senate ranking member and the chair, and you have the House ranking member and chair, and they all got together and they put together this bill. So it's going to pass. There may be tweaks to it. If you want to see the bill, you can go to our website and you can download it, and it's there. It's relatively small, 15 pages. Here are the main facts. This is the good news, in my opinion. Every year we come up to the SBA Lending Holiday. Are we going to run out of money? What's the problem? The Congress is giving the administrator the authority to increase the levels by 15%, which means that we're at a $29 billion level for 2018. Now we're up to $33.3 billion. So we're not going to be looking at interruptions. Last I looked at the numbers, there was a lot in the first quarter. That always happens. But that should be sufficient authority for this year. Do you have an opinion on that, Lance?
Well, Bob, in all my years of SBA lending, there's always this period where you get to late July or August, and SBA is close to running out of money, and you're scrambling. And, SBA runs out of lending authority early September, and then you've got a 30-day period where you really can't submit anything. And quite often they get the authority bump. But I think the key thing here is it gives the administrator, Ms. McMahon, the opportunity to make sure we don't have a 3 to 6 week lending holiday at the end of every fiscal year. I think this is great.
And that was never the intent of Congress, to have a hard cap. The intent of Congress is, we'll talk about it, credit elsewhere and oversight. So this is good news. I'm glad they did that. Regarding lender oversight, if you're interested in how it would look in terms of the organizational chart, go ahead and look at the bill. I'm not going to talk about that, but they are talking about a new office, moving people over and establishing an oversight committee. The big thing on this is that SBA will have the ability to fine a lender up to $250,000. And as Lance and I said, that's not the real penalty. I think once you get to that point, there's a lot of other things that would happen. I don't believe SBA is going to institute a system where they're going to be fining lenders regularly. I'm guessing this is going to be the one-time rogue lenders that pop up every 3 or 4 years in the industry. If you have a problem, as I said, they're going to deny the guarantee. I don't think they're going to go and also fine you on top of that. What do you think, Lance?
Well, Bob, when I was at SBA at the Commercial Loan Servicing Center, so many SBA lenders think that SBA is trying to find a way not to pay the guarantee. And the reality is, Bob, we spend our time trying to find a way to pay the guarantee.
Yeah.
And if you look at the statistical information, in excess of 90% of all guaranteed purchase requests that are submitted are paid. If you violate the SOP, if you break a law, if you ignore your loan, you might get a guarantee denial, but it doesn't happen very often. And that's the same thought process on this fine. Yes, SBA has the opportunity to fine lenders, but the reality is they're going to find ways to work with that lender and not fine them. There'll be lenders who break the rules, ignore the SOP, and they may get fined. But SBA is a great agency and has great people in it, and they're not looking to fine you. But I think
they're going to kill the program, and that's not going to happen. I think if you get to the level where you're going to be fined by SBA, you've lost your 750, you've lost your delegated authority, you've lost a lot of other things. So I think this just gives some teeth to the regulation, and it also, it puts you on a little bit of notice that, whoa, I don't want to be fined. None of us want to be fined. So
where I do see this coming into play, Bob, is you got a bad lender, and SBA spending a lot of time and resources trying to figure out what they've done. This is a way for them to recapture some of that financial resources spent trying to deal with a rogue lender.
The good news is also several years ago, this was introduced or talked about in the Senate, and they were going to reduce the premiums that you split with the agency from 110 to 108. That is nowhere in this bill. That is long gone. So no one's talking about lowering that split of the premiums. Obviously, there will be additional funding on this, and they say, yeah, the administration needs to tell us how much this is going to cost, and we're going to do it. So I believe that's good news. Lance and I continued the conversation about Congress's definition of credit elsewhere. The big thing, and I want to put this into context, that's what Lance and I do, is the credit elsewhere. Congress has been wrestling with this for years. The reason why you have such strong bipartisan support is the agency says we do two things. We provide access to capital to Main Street who can't get it, and the program pays for itself. And you talk to these congressional staffs, and on the Republican side of the aisle, they go, that makes sense. We can support that. But what they've done is they say, we're going to hold the lenders' feet to the fire to make sure that we're not granting loans that can be obtained on a conventional basis. So what they've done is they expanded the definition of credit elsewhere. And there's some minor tweaks on that, but basically, let's disclose it, let's document it, and we're good to go.
And guys, I've been preaching this message for a while, and Bob does too. Credit elsewhere needs to be addressed in your credit memorandum. Additionally, with the emphasis on credit elsewhere, and when SBA comes in to do an on-site review, they're going to be looking at credit elsewhere in every loan file. So it needs to be in your credit memorandum, and it needs to be clearly addressed. I like having an additional credit elsewhere memo in your SBA loan file. Don't hide it. Don't try to push it underneath another document. Make it very apparent that you as an SBA lender have addressed why credit is not available elsewhere.
Yeah, and so this isn't a change. It's basically address it, put it in the credit memo, and document it. That's the big issue where lenders get themselves in troubles. They don't even address it, right, Lance?
Oh, absolutely. And the most common credit elsewhere proofs are collateral coverage that's not adequate according to loan policy. You need a longer amortization than allowed by policy. Or maybe they're in an industry, a risky industry, the restaurant industry, absolutely. Maybe they're in a risky industry that your bank would not lend to otherwise. Yeah. But just make sure you address on every SBA loan that you underwrite and close the reason credit is not available elsewhere.
The reviews that I've seen, or the criticism that the lenders have, isn't the specific reason for credit elsewhere. I have not seen an inspector general or someone criticize a lender for whatever the reason is. Where they get criticized, they don't even address it, or they cookie cutter it, cut and paste. Credit is unavailable elsewhere. You can't do that.
Well, Bob, and I want to make this statement because I've made it several times in my life. The best way to understand credit elsewhere, if you're approving an SBA loan that is not somewhat of an exception to your loan policy, every SBA loan you approve should be an exception to policy. And the SBA guarantees what allows you to do it. That is how you prove credit elsewhere. But if you're making an SBA loan that is not an exception to policy, whether it be amortization or term, whether it be collateral coverage, whether it be industry or business life cycle stage, if it's not an exception to your policy, you're technically violating credit elsewhere.
Yeah. So I don't see any major changes on that. There's tweaking in the language, but that should not be of concern to the industry. I hope you enjoyed that. Hey, one of the cool things I get to do is interview fascinating professionals in our industry. Our first interview in our podcast is Pat Mackrell, the new president of NADCO, the National Association of Development Companies. I'm talking with Pat Mackrell. All right, I got to get this straight. President and CEO of New York Development Company and affiliated companies, upstate New York, micro lender extraordinaire. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Bob.
Also, chairman of the board of NADCO, the National Association of Development Companies, the new chairman. 504 lending. Pat, why is this so popular?
Well, I think, Bob, there's a few old standbys for the 504 product. The rate is, great. The term has always been popular, and the fact of the amortization period, level amortization period over 20 years has always been a big hit. But the equity portion also, the allowing it facilitates a lower down payment, and allows the business owner to retain capital in the business, working capital that it can use to support and expand jobs growth.
Pat,
I think it's also, those are always what's been the hallmarks of the program. Right now, we're seeing, I think, growth in the 504 lending because of an uncertain rate environment in terms of borrowers looking for that. I think we're also looking at, banks concerned about real estate concentration. There's the regulatory focus on that. And I think we're all looking at what we see as a slowdown in commercial lending. And ideally, the SBA program should be counter-cyclical to the market. And I think part of that, the increase of 504 lending, is attributable to the slowdown in the commercial side.
Pat, you and I read the Fed, they're going to bump interest rates. So the 504 fixed rate, I assume, is popular for your clients and for Main Street.
Very much so, Bob. Very much so.
I love reading your bio. Marine Corps vet. Thank you for your service. Law school, lawyer. How'd you get into this niche? As with the old Jack Welch saying, how did you parachute into SBA lending for Main Street?
I think it was a trap.
A lot of wine,
Yeah, a lot of wine. Personally, I was, had a great time in the Marine Corps. I learned a lot about leadership, learned a lot about people, and had leadership opportunities and challenges at an early age that, many wouldn't be fortunate enough to have. Morphed out of that into, went to law school while I was in the Marine Corps, and when I left the Marine Corps, I went into commercial law, basically in litigation in the Albany, New York area, representing commercial clients, mostly in shareholder matters and disputes and valuation. I was the partner at our firm that was in charge of my firm represented Empire State BDC and NYBDC back in the early 2000s or late 1990s, and I was the partner in charge of that relationship. I went to the 504 loan closing course, but I can tell you, I never closed a 504 loan. There were fortunately people more knowledgeable in that than myself here, but and then I was recruited by the board as part of the transition team after our succession plan for Bob Lazar. We don't make change very often here. We've been in business since 1955.
Wow.
And I'm the fourth president during that time. So my predecessor was at the helm for 18 years. I've been at the helm here for almost 13 years. So it's we don't do that change very often. So I was recruited by the board, and I've never looked back. It's been an incredible journey. Incredible company, an incredible way to sort of close up my career.
Nice story. Last question, Pat. When we get involved with nonprofits, you're going to be the chairman of NADCO. You want to leave an imprint. What is the one thing you want to do for NADCO, for CDCs, and the 504 lending professional industry?
Well, how about if I give you two?
All right, go ahead.
Improving collaboration, communication with the SBA to facilitate continuous improvement of the program is uppermost in my mind in terms of the most important goal that we have. In this regard, we're bringing our efforts to bear on key points involving collaboration, making the program more accessible, trying to figure out how to streamline it, trying to make sure that we understand and modernize the program so that it stays relevant to the consumer. Second goal is to improve and increase our service in underserved communities and markets, particularly rural areas and initiatives, and to work with the SBA to facilitate greater penetration of the program.
Nice. Great goals, great answer. Pat Mackrell, President, New York Business Development Company and affiliated companies, and Chairman of the Board of NADCO. Pat, Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Bob. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today for the Coleman Report Update and for supporting America's small businesses, one entrepreneur at a time.